First, I'd like to just say welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're super excited for this Secure AI webinar. Today, we're going to talk about how we're taking a threat-informed approach to securing AI-enabled systems here at MITRE in the Center for Threat-Informed Defense. So I'm John Baker, the director of MITRE's Center for Threat-Informed Defense, and we're very fortunate to have with us Dr. Christina Liaghati. Christina is the MITRE Atlas lead. Christina, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Thanks so much, John. It's really great to be on with everybody this morning. As John said, I'm Christina Liaghati. I lead MITRE Atlas, which is our community collaborative that a lot of our security has been built around, and we'll be talking more about that today.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. And so we wanted to start by first providing a little bit of context. So we say we're taking a threat-informed approach to securing AI. We go to the next slide. And so first off, we probably ought to explain what threat-informed defense is for everybody. So threat-informed defense really is about taking that systematic application of deep technical understanding of adversary tradecraft and using it to improve your defenses. And so what that really means is we want to understand what adversaries have done, looking specifically at their behaviors, and use that knowledge to drive improvement to our defenses. And here at the Center for Threat-Informed Defense, we are celebrating our 5-year anniversary. And over the past 5 years, we've been working across the community to create resources to make it easy for organizations to embrace threat-informed defense and improve their defenses. And so over the past 6 or 9 months within our research program, we've been working together with Christina and the Atlas team to take some of those lessons learned and the experience we've had with threat-informed defense and apply that to advance security for AI-enabled systems. Christina, do you want to kind of jump in and give context for, what does that mean? What is security for AI-enabled systems really all about, and where are we focused?
Absolutely. I'll kind of start at the 10,000-foot view to give you all a feel for what we mean by AI security or securing AI-enabled systems and what that looks like as part of this larger AI assurance challenge area, which is something that has really continued to evolve as more organizations have been implementing AI-enabled systems as part of larger system of systems contexts. And as you would imagine, this has really continued to evolve and accelerate a lot over the last few years, especially since things like ChatGPT, right, captured the imagination and excitement of innovators around the world. So all of that kind of starts to present these risks for how we're using AI-enabled systems in a larger system of systems context. And we frame that as AI assurance, right? This is one way of breaking down that problem. This is not an all-encompassing list of all the challenges that you could see in implementing an AI-enabled system, but it's a way of kind of slicing those challenges up into different areas. And the one that's highlighted on the left-hand side there is really focused on the security risks associated with bringing in AI-enabled systems into your larger systems context. And that's where a lot of our Atlas continue to evolve focused and what we're going to be primarily talking through today. So with that, I'll also talk about one other kind of big intersection when you really start thinking about AI security in the larger context of its intersections with the more traditional cyberspace. And when I say AI security, I'm really talking about the security and assurance of AI-enabled systems themselves. That's part of this kind of larger landscape of the AI intersections with cyber. And we have a lot of really cool work going on in applying AI to the larger cyber landscape. But that's kind of outside of the scope of what we're focused on, at least under the Atlas umbrella right now, and potentially under some of the nearer term secure AI focus work. So that's part of the potential expansion for collaboration with the community under the larger center work area. But most of the work I'm going to be talking about today is in that first bubble.
So Christina, with that sort of a little bit of context for where we'll focus today, I did want to make sure that people saw we would love to hear questions from you. We're monitoring the sort of the Q&A panel here. We are happy to take questions as we go throughout the session today. We have some questions that we've already received that we'll use at the very end if we don't get any other live questions now. But very much appreciate your live questions and make this conversational. We really want you to get out of this everything that you hope to. So ask away.
Yeah, very much so. We would love to make this as a discussion that's as useful to y'all as we can. Kind of with that framing, I'll give you all at least a couple of initial topics here as we're kind of understanding what we mean by AI security and what these new vulnerabilities look like, especially. I'm going to frame that in the context of a couple of different attack patterns that we've seen demonstrated in the wild, kind of at two opposite ends of the overall spectrum here to give you a bit more of a feel for what those AI security vulnerabilities and incidents really look like. The first of these here is a shadow RAID vulnerability that part of the community actually found almost a year ago, or a little over a year ago now, actually, that really exploits the infrastructure around an AI-enabled system itself or a model itself, right? So this is a vulnerability that's really inherent to an AI-enabled system's infrastructure. So it really only shows up when you're incorporating AI in a certain way, and in this case, with a certain tool. But we're still considering that kind of part of the new vulnerability landscape here, because it's honestly something that wouldn't have presented itself as part of a more traditional cyber system, and it's kind of unique to what happens when you're deploying an AI-enabled system. And in this case, the RAID jobs API can enable a malicious threat actor actually to get access to, right, PII sensitive data and information when you're exposing this kind of a array API hosting unit to an external party, right? Like it's designed to be used inside of your secure network. And actually a CVE was submitted on this, but Ray disputed it. So folks aren't even tracking it in some scenarios because it's a disputed CVE instead of a verified one. So these kinds of vulnerabilities exist out there already in the wild. And in this particular example, since it's been out there for over a year now, we've seen like large scale analysis of it done and extreme potential for vulnerabilities that are being exercised, right? Like across the larger community landscape. Several like $1 billion at this point worth of potential impact that's already happened because of this kind of vulnerability that's out there. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we see things like these model unique vulnerabilities are really baked into the AI components themselves. And in this scenario, a series of researchers here, this wasn't a malicious threat actor, but they were showing that on a real world deployable system, right? So this wasn't like just an exquisite lab environment, but on a real world deployable system, you could really see how you could take advantage of a RAG enabled email server to deliberately propagate a malicious attack, kind of similar to the old school worm style, which is they named it the Morris Worm 2, to deliberately actually propagate a malicious attack through a email servers, right? Like buddies, if you will, right? Like if an email server has the ability to detect a malicious email and potentially send a bounce back email or something like that, right? Like have a little bit of autonomy in that scenario, that's enough for it to be able to propagate a malicious attack that might be white on white text or binary or something that isn't really very visible to a human. But it's something that the system receives as an input, right? Like all data coming into a RAG system or an LLM, right? Is perceived as instruction as much as it is data, right? So somebody could embed malicious instruction into one of these emails that comes into a RAG-enabled email server that might then be received and then propagated throughout the different other email servers that it might interact with through bounce back emails or otherwise. So these kinds of vulnerabilities are really baked into those AI-enabled systems themselves because the data layer, right, and the controls layer for these things are really the same layer, right? You really can't treat these AI-enabled systems in the same way that you normally would for more traditional cyber vulnerability management. So these are the kind of two spectrums, if you will, for the kinds of AI security vulnerabilities that we've been focused on across the community over the last several years as we've been trying to kind of help characterize and capture these challenges. And ultimately, that led to about 5 years ago, us working with about a dozen companies to start to try and generalize what these attack patterns look like, kind of building off of the types of language, right? Like the kind of organizational schemes that we've seen already leveraged across much of the cyber community. And that led us to actually building a framework that was modeled after MITRE ATT&CK. Which was already a tool that a lot of folks were pretty familiar with using, right? Kind of using that tactic, technique, and procedure format to break down what was actually happening in these AI security attacks into more generalizable terms. And if you've seen attack before, Atlas looks very familiar, right? It's deliberately designed to look and feel very similar to attack, and actually reuses some of the tactics and techniques from the original attack matrix. We actually denote which of the tactics and techniques are either the same, right? They're directly pulled from the attack matrix, or they're slight tweaks on that with these little red ampersands. So you can kind of see alongside, right, like these more unique to AI-enabled system attack vectors that are the new tactics and techniques in the matrix. There's also the ones with the red ampersand, and that's because, like, when you think about it, right, that makes a lot of logical sense, because these AI-enabled systems are, never on their own, right? Like, they're always part of a larger system of systems context. They're not like in a vacuum or floating, right? Like they're part of a larger cyber system, and that means that usually we're seeing attackers actually chain together a sequence of more traditional tactics and techniques alongside tactics and techniques that take advantage of these new AI security, right? Like AI unique vulnerabilities. And that's where we deliberately tried to kind of capture those more generalized components into these like bite-sized chunks that became the tactics and techniques in the Atlas matrix. We've matured that a lot over the last 5 years. And as you would imagine, as more and more organizations have been deploying AI-enabled systems in the wild, we see, new attack vectors emerging on a pretty regular basis. So we keep it updated about twice a year with a major update, and then occasional updates throughout the year, depending on how urgently something comes out. But we now have over 150 organizations involved, and we've been deliberately working with the Center for Threat Informed Defense over the last 6 to 9 months, like John mentioned, to continue to mature both Atlas and the tools and capabilities around it to make it all much more actionable for the community. And that ultimately has led to some of the work that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit more detail. But before we dive into that, I'll just give you a little bit more of a feel for what it looks like to ground the matrix itself in the case studies behind the matrix. And these are really what underpins all the tactics and techniques in the matrix itself. Right. Here's an example case study kind of similar to what we had talked about previously, where a couple of individuals were taking advantage of how the Shanghai Tax Authority was leveraging a facial recognition system to verify people's identities before giving them privileged access to their networks. And in this scenario, they were presenting modified video feeds of headshots that were very crudely blinking their eyes and slightly turning their head, right? Nothing as sophisticated as the deepfake videos that we see today, but that was enough to fool the facial recognition system that they were using, and ultimately allow these two attackers to steal $77 million over a 2.5-year period. It's worked over and over again before a human in the loop caught it in kind of a random spot check. So these kind of attacks are happening in the wild, and we're deliberately working with our industry collaborators to develop tools and capabilities to help folks protect against this and mitigate these risks. So we launched in the summer our first Secure AI project under the Center for Threat Informed Defense with 16 collaborators. So a lot of really cool engagement from across the broader community to directly shape and inform the developments of the tools and capabilities and the updates to Atlas itself. And we just completed that in October. So we're excited to get to talk to you all a little bit more about what we actually accomplished in that first project and kind of where we're headed next. So to talk a little bit more about what we actually focused on under that Secure AI project, the problem is kind of framed in this larger Atlas and AI security context, right? Kind of thinking about the traditional cyber vulnerabilities and these new vulnerabilities that come from AI-enabled systems as they're all susceptible to these new attack patterns, right? Kind of, all right, we know there's a risk here, but what do we do about it? That solution is really kind of focusing on accelerating both Atlas as a matrix to be representative of those real-world threats, right? Kind of understanding that baseline, right? The real world, the front line of what these AI security systems or AI-enabled systems are facing from security threats, as well as developing metrics, mechanisms, tools, and techniques for folks to actually mitigate some of those threats, right? Kind of understand them and then deal with them over time. And the actual impact of that, right? The target goal coming out of this work is to really enable organizations to deal with these risks, right? Kind of actually mitigate some of these emergent attack surfaces and really kind of understand what we can do to mitigate these threats over time. I just saw a question coming into the chat. Is the session being recorded and will the slides be shared? Yes, it is being recorded and the slides will be shared afterwards. To kind of talk through some of the core deliverables behind the project, we deliberately focused on three particular efforts. The first of those is to keep the Atlas knowledge base representative of kind of the latest emergent threats we've seen proven out on a real world basis, right? Those are the kind of like grounded in the real world attack environments, but we try to keep that updated very regularly. So we actually collaborated directly with the different members of this project, actually to add additional case studies and add new tactics and techniques to keep it very accurate and representative of the latest evolutionary attacks that we've seen in the space. So that's the first core deliverable and focus area under the Secure AI project. The next was to dive into generative AI threats in particular. That is one of the spaces that we've seen evolve most rapidly since folks have seen and gotten excited about the ways that LLMs and RAG-enabled systems can be leveraged since the release of ChatGPT over 2 years ago now, which feels like a lifetime ago considering how much the AI-enabled system space has changed since then. But we deliberately focused on adding new Gen AI threats under this Secure AI project. And then we also synchronized updates to Atlas and Attack. Right? This is deliberately to try and keep that interoperability and usability between Atlas and Attack as up to date as possible. So whenever Attack does an adaptation of a tactic and technique that we're using in Atlas, we deliberately are trying to kind of keep those in sync. To dive into those into a little bit more detail, I'll do a little bit of an overview of the actual case studies that we added. So there's a few listed out here that we actually added as part of the overall adaptation of the matrix that we released to the public-facing website in October. Several of those were deliberately actually submitted by some of our collaborative members on the project. So thank you to the awesome members listed there in the bottom left that actually either submitted case studies or very directly influenced these adaptations to the matrix with their submissions. That those case studies and the adaptations to the matrix actually led to the addition or adaptations of the techniques listed in the middle column there. So you can kind of see how rapidly this space is changing, right? We're not talking about tiny movements. We're talking about really heavy and constant evolution of the AI security threat space right now. And then Asians landscape as well. This is honestly one of the most exciting and rapidly evolving focus areas as we continue to build up the community that really understands this AI security threat landscape. And we're working together to deliberately design and implement new ways to mitigate and like detect and understand the ways that we can actually kind of control the risk environment, right, around these AI-enabled systems. There's honestly a lot of tools and techniques or attacks and techniques right now that we can't even detect, much less mitigate. So this is a major focus for us across the community right now as we try to understand and control this risk environment. I mentioned that we synchronize the updates between Atlas and Attack, and this is another thing that we're deliberately focused on continuing to keep updated as folks are trying to kind of leverage these tools alongside each other, right? Not all cyber systems contain AI-enabled systems, or not all systems that cyber is focused on protecting contain AI-enabled systems. So there's definitely still a bit of a difference between, when you might want to use one matrix over the other. But Atlas is very much meant to be used right alongside Attack, so we try to keep these in sync as much as possible for folks that are trying to leverage both. The next piece that we focused on under the project was the incident sharing effort. And this was deliberately designed to try and help continue to gather, especially sensitive incident information across the community so we can inform a little bit more of how these attacks are happening at scale. As you would imagine, the case studies in the Atlas Matrix and honestly much of the media headlines, right? Like much of the way that the community is talking about these threats today in the public environment is only a tiny piece of really how many attacks are actually happening behind closed doors and inside of kind of the reputational risk environment, right? Like with sensitive data or with IP. And in a way that most organizations probably won't be talking about them because of those, reputation or associated with those incidents. So we deliberately, kind of using MITRE as that third-party safe space in the middle of the community, worked with the broader community over the last couple of years to shape a better way to capture some of those incidents in a protected data sharing environment that would leverage MITRE as that kind of anonymization, desensitizing third party in the middle there to where folks can, under a very lightweight data sharing agreement, share incidents with us. We work with them to protect the sensitive data inside of that, but then share out the kind of core technical details behind that incident to ultimately inform a lot more of that trusted community of collaborators with what's actually going on inside of the larger organizational community. So All of that led to the focus under the Secure AI project to design this more digital focused platform, this initiative, to deliberately capture some of those incidents more easily across the community. And we launched that website as part of our deliverables coming out of the Secure AI project in October. And that website is deliberately designed through kind of lightweight incident reporting questions, right, that we map on the back end to STIX formatting and some of the more traditionally used cyber threat intel formatting, right, to make that data as usable across the trusted community that is submitting as possible, as we try to kind of bundle that right now and capture it in a little bit more of an anonymized scale. Before we are going to start pushing it back out to the community. And right now, if you're interested in receiving this data, you really have to be submitting to it. And this is deliberately designed to try and kind of both encourage, right, folks to be participating in this incident sharing environment, as well as help us to kind of build up that statistically relevant, right, like level of information. So we are actually protecting people's data before we share it back out with the trusted community of submitters. So we're taking that kind of STIX mapping on the back end and working through this in beta testing right now with the larger community. But this is all because of the work that we just completed with the Secure AI project. I mentioned a few times now that those two major updates, right, the update to the Atlas website and the matrix itself, they're on the public-facing site, is updated now as of the release and the completion of our project. On October 2nd, as well as the launch of the incident sharing effort. So both of those are now out there as public websites for you to take a look at, with the updates for the Atlas Matrix characterized under the updates page, and the incidents website up and running now for you to take a look at that, and the data sharing agreement for you to kind of understand a little bit more of like how you can participate and understand that effort. Kind of looking forward from there, a lot of what we're focused on right now is kind of where we're headed with the larger community. The what's next is really what we're going to be doing really hopefully over the course of all of next year. And that's the continued expansion on the threat emulation tools, right? One of the open source tools that we developed with the community and open sourced at the earlier part of last year started to get into this threat emulation environment around AI security tools. We also, I mentioned earlier, are continually expanding mitigations, the Gen AI attack vectors that we just pushed out in the October update to the Matrix. All of that is continually evolving right now, as well as our international engagement with the broader community. We also have been collaborating with the larger CVE and CWE community over the last 6 to 9 months to better characterize what it looks like to capture AI security vulnerabilities and weaknesses in the larger context of the cyber world. And actually, one of the big things that has continued to kind of come out of that and our engagements with that broader community is actually that there's a significant number of vulnerabilities, especially as you think about that larger assurance landscape, that will fall outside of the scope of CVE and CWE. And that's actually where a lot of our work with the larger community right now might capture some of those vulnerabilities and weaknesses in an AI risk database. This is something that we took over earlier this year from one of the collaborators in the community that really offered it up as something that could be hosted by MITRE to enable more of that data sharing across the community, because it's kind of rooted in the vision of something like VirusTotal, right? To allow folks to try and understand the vulnerabilities in a system before downloading a model or trying to kind of leverage it as large of a broader system of systems. And we've got a vision for potentially even adding some scanning capabilities behind that. MITRE is fortunate enough to get to support NIST in the development of an open source tool called Dioptra that NIST released as part of their response to the executive order earlier this summer. So that's an open source tool for the community to start to kind of do a test platform implementation around trustworthy AI. And we're working through a vision right now for how to kind of integrate the two of those as a longer development plan. So there's a lot of tools and capabilities that we're deliberately trying to kind of work with the broader secure AI community right now to kind of build some things that can be useful for actually understanding and mitigating these risks as we kind of keep Atlas up to date and we build more of these tools and capabilities under the hood. So we're really excited to continue some of these collaborative projects under the Center for Threat-Informed Defense and with the larger community to really kind of understand what's going on in this space. And I'll ask John to jump in now and talk a little bit more about the center and how more folks can get involved.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And so, as you can tell, there's a ton of opportunity and a pretty aggressive research roadmap, really working to take that threat-informed approach to advancing security for AI-enabled systems. So with the Center for Threat Informed Defense, what we've done is we've built an environment where we bring together sophisticated security teams from around the world to systematically identify problems and solve them through a collaborative research and development program. So organizations join us, they work with us to identify, what are the most pressing problems to focus on. Obviously, secure AI is top of most organizations' mind these days. And that then leads to launching projects to advance secure AI capabilities for the whole community. As you're learning more about the center, you can find all of our work, everything we do, we publish and make open and freely available up on our website. So ctid.io/our work. As we go forward here, Christina, we've built together with our members a roadmap for areas where we want to continue to focus our secure AI research. I thought we could kind of leave this slide up here for people to process, and with the last few minutes, answer any questions that you all might have that are attending today. So I'll pause there for any questions to come in for a moment. Okay. So maybe the first question here is for Christina. With Atlas, how are you seeing organizations apply Atlas today?
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing it being leveraged in everything from education, right? So kind of security awareness across the community to help folks kind of understand what their risks look like as they're trying to think about whether or not they should be or how they might want to be thinking about deploying AI-enabled systems, right? So kind of security awareness and education to informing everything all the way down to their like day-to-day operations and AI red teaming practices, right? So like actually testing and understanding how their systems are at risk. And that actually is informing some of how we're thinking about our follow-on work under the Secure AI project and actually potentially building some additional tools and capabilities like Arsenal, right? As like open source tools and capabilities to get folks initially in the door for what it looks like to actually emulate some of these AI security threats and understand a little bit more of their hands-on risk in that environment, right? Some more playbooks, red teaming tools and capabilities, as well as the larger mitigation strategies and the kind of larger landscape of things that will help inform more of their day-to-day operations.
So, Christina, we're getting a nice set of questions coming in here. So thank you, everybody. My inclination is to allow us to run a couple minutes over and just answer as many questions as we can. So with that in mind, we have one here, Christina. Does Atlas have any guidance as to how to monitor and detect AI security incidents inside an enterprise?
Yeah, so this is definitely part of the larger mitigation conversation. There are several types of threats right now that we really cannot detect. And honestly, like I think some of the best practices there are kind of similar to the more traditional cyber world, where actually red teaming your system before you've deployed it and actually kind of understanding these potential risks at the very beginning of the design and development of your system, right? So where is your training data coming from? Who is labeling it? What are your original design and performance parameters? That's actually where you have the most control to potentially understand and mitigate that risk, right? So kind of be thinking about these AI security risks at the very beginning of the development through the actual kind of development lifecycle and deployment and operation of that system, because these systems also change over time. And that's part of the difference here in the security landscape. So definitely there are some things that you cannot be detecting or mitigating, right? Like if you're just thinking about this after the fact. So I would really encourage folks to start thinking about this up front, as well as through the life cycle of that entire system.
Thanks, Christina. So why don't you go to the next slide, just because I realize we're at time. We'll leave our call to action up here. So the fundamental call to action is really for you to join us, to get involved in the research. There's kind of two primary ways, or three really. One, we would love it if you would go check out Atlas, use the work, give us feedback. So become a user and become a demanding user. Tell us where we need to go next and help us shape what Atlas is. The second thing is, we are actively looking for data contributors to the AI incident sharing program to drive that community-wide knowledge, as Christina said. And, finally, if you look back at that set of organizations that are collaborating and really driving what we do in this research program, and you see yourself and your organization as a good fit to lead the way, join us. So you can learn more at ctit.io/get involved or scan the QR code. With that, I did want to go back and try to get a couple more questions here. Very much appreciate the questions you provided. The next question I had here was for Christina. How do you see commercial products either implementing or planning to implement and integrate Atlas into their products? Basically looking to see if there's something coming similar to how vendors have implemented attack in their products or defend in their products.
Yeah, this is actually something that we've been really excited to work with the broader community on over the last several years, as especially more and more AI security startups have kind of come out of the woodworks, right? And started to see success in the industry environment. And many of them actually started working with us before they even came out of stealth mode, right? So a lot of them actually already have Atlas integrated into their tool suite to be able to even just help to characterize where their tools mitigate threats or kind of understand those threats, where their tools are most effective, and then also kind of show a little bit of their coverage against the Atlas matrix, and leverage some of the tools and techniques that we've been putting out across the broader community. So yeah, absolutely. That's already kind of happening at scale across much of the AI security industry landscape. And then we're seeing it continue to happen a little bit more, even in some of the more traditional cyber community that's starting to focus on this threat landscape as well. So absolutely, that adaptation is happening, and we're hoping to continue to enable it as much as we can, just to continue to bring the entire baseline of the AI security community and honestly the AI community as a whole up, and secure even more these threats as they continue to evolve.
Thanks, Christina. So I think we'll take one more live question. And as we close, just wanted to make sure everybody caught the message that the slides, the session recording will be posted in a few days or a week or so here, as soon as we have it processed. So thank you all for joining us. The last question was a question about how can a small business get involved with the Center for Threat Informed Defense? Is being part of the community with a smaller network footprint still valuable? We are absolutely open at the Center for Threat Informed Defense to everybody joining us, getting involved, and helping to advance the overall research program. Easiest way to open up that conversation and kind of explore how to do that would be to go to the link ctit.io/get involved. You'll end up either submitting a form or emailing, and we'll find some time to talk with you and kind of see what you have in mind. It's important that we understand what your goals are and that we find alignment with your goals in our research program, so that we can advance the community resources. With that, I do see a wave of additional questions here. I think we need to wrap up at 11:35 here. Christina, thank you so much for taking the time to work with us on this webinar. I'm super excited about what we're going to do together next in the Secure AI Research Program. And thank you all to the attendees for joining us today. We hope to hear from you.
Thanks all. We'll hopefully get to collaborate with you in the future.